guessing we've all thought of it. About the wildfire smoke in the air at the same time as a respiratory pandemic? The state health department's worried about it too. A next viewer tells me I'm wrong about COVID-19 restrictions. All right, let's hear them out. A rural part of Colorado braced for economic ruin from the pandemic and the economic shutdown. It never happened. That's great news. Your next question about ballots mailed to people after they move, and a trip inside a suburban speakeasy of sorts. What they're calling the Garage à Trois. It's a family show, but the kids in the room did not get that, so we're good. And this is next. Colorado's top elections official says voters should not be allowed to see election results on election night. Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold is issuing what could be an unprecedented call for journalists across America to withhold vote totals from the public because she says that President Trump will use those early numbers to declare victory prematurely. Griswold made her proclamation on social media this afternoon, specifically calling on national media outlets not to release election night vote totals and not to make projections. Now, media outlets have already warned viewers that vote counting this year, with so many mail-in ballots, is going to take extra time. And journalists have alerted the public that President Trump may use early results to claim victory and then try to shut down vote counting. But Secretary of State Griswold is calling for media outlets to actively suppress public knowledge of the vote counts released by her own office and other ones like it. Griswold's challenge is likely to win her significant national media attention, and we understand that she's booked to appear on CNN tonight. Her spokesperson said that she would be available to answer our questions tomorrow. So, a current situation out in the air, not great for people with lungs. You've got the wildfire smoke as well as COVID-19 out there. We don't know a ton about how those two simultaneous threats interact. Our Anusha Roy found state public health experts worried about that possibility.
This morning looked like too many mornings recently, with smoke settling over Rabbit Ears Pass and the sun trying to show itself through the haze.
So this is kind of new territory.
New territory about what happens when wildfire smoke and COVID-19 meet.
Patients are exposed to smoke, whether it's through wildfires or more locally, fires near their home, that can trigger an asthma or COPD type exacerbation. And then if they got COVID on top of that, then that would definitely put them in a worse situation.
Dr. Anuj Mehta with National Jewish Health and Denver Health said that this is a time of year when he typically sees more people struggling with things like COPD and asthma.
If somebody's having an asthma exacerbation and happens to have COVID, it's hard to say exactly, oh, it was the wildfires that caused it, as opposed to the COVID.
We asked the state health department if they're worried, and in a statement they wrote, while there remains a measure of scientific uncertainty about the exact relationship between COVID-19 and the health consequences of exposure to wildfire smoke, we recognize it as a real concern.
What would you say are the big questions that still need to be answered?
There are a few different things. One is just studying the epidemiology at the biologic level. Does smoke inhalation cause damage to the lungs that increases the ability of the virus to get into the system? Again, like I said, there's very weak evidence for that right now. And so it's not a major concern that we have.
But there is one thing Dr. Mehta noticed.
But there's the biology where the two can interact and potentially make somebody's lung health much worse. Versus the social behavioral aspect.
That includes some people opting to stay at home to avoid the smoke.
So by no means are cloth or surgical masks sufficient to prevent any sort of damage from wildfire smoke. They're obviously really good at reducing the likelihood of getting COVID.
So the CDC said that wildfire smoke can definitely irritate some people's lung. It can even compromise some people's immune systems, which would in general make them more susceptible to lung infections, and that would include COVID-19. Doctors are just saying that all of this needs more research because COVID is still relatively new, and so is this timeline that we're talking about. So if you think about the flu season, it tends to, in general, peak later in the year. So it is unusual to see COVID-19 happening at the same time as wildfire smoke, and there's just a lot to learn here, Kyle.
Anusha, obviously we're not the only state dealing with wildfires and not the only place dealing with COVID. The combination exists elsewhere in America.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what all the doctors were saying, that, if you're going to research this, you need to do it nationwide. So actually, at the federal level, there are some conversations going on right now about setting aside money to look into this very thing about wildfires and COVID-19 intersecting. But that funding has not quite been secured yet.
All right. Anush Roy, thank you very much. Let's look at the COVID-19 picture statewide right now. Hospitalizations have hit the 200 patient mark for the first time since early August. 200 people are in Colorado's hospitals with COVID-19 right now. That's up 22 from yesterday. Our weekly moving average is now at 180 patients a day. That's up almost 30 patients from a week ago. About 3.5% of Colorado's COVID-19 tests came back positive yesterday. That's right about where our weekly moving average is, and down slightly from where it was a week ago. Deaths have dropped way off from our first initial peak, but I know the number of you have asked for those. So here's what we have most recently. These numbers are from Monday. 7-day average is that 2 Coloradans are being lost to COVID-19 each day. That's down from what averaged out to be a bit more than 3 deaths per day in the week prior. Getting some feedback about a recent commentary on the topic of COVID-19 lately. I want to share a good bit of Steve Aiden's notes. Very thoughtful. He writes, "You recently suggested opening the discussion about easing COVID-19 restrictions. You've also been repeatedly downplaying Colorado's recent COVID-19 numbers. I think this approach is off the mark and jeopardizes the progress that we've made. The virus is still out there, and exponential growth is both insidious and powerful. As long as the virus is still present," Steve wrote, "any relaxation in precautions risks reigniting the exponential growth in case numbers." Steve, you make a whole lot of good points there. I would respectfully disagree with the idea that I've been downplaying Colorado's COVID-19 numbers. I think when they were encouraging in July and August, we celebrated that. Then when numbers increased in September, we urged caution on that front. I think we also, Steve, might disagree about whether Colorado should discuss what it would take in the future to loosen restrictions. My worry is that if even discussing next steps is taboo, that doesn't convince people that their current sacrifices are worthwhile. Public health restrictions based in solid science can hold up to scrutiny and to public discussion. And that conversation, I think, might even convince some critics that what we have are sensible precautions and restrictions that won't last forever. So we saw every level of government in our state and other places brace for the impact of the economic shutdown that followed the pandemic, the impact on revenues, just the money that government needs to do the basic stuff that people expect. And they cringed, picturing what could happen in the San Luis Valley, where the governments there struggled to serve a low-income population that's spread out over a large area. And then, as our Marshall Zellinger explains, the big hit never came.
When the stay-at-home order took effect in March, the San Luis Valley missed out on tourists. But when the people of the valley also had to stay at home, so did their money.
So it was definitely a nightmare when this hit.
Alamosa expected a drop in tourist dollars because of COVID-19.
We were looking at maybe a 20 to 25% reduction.
Around $1 million the city expected to collect, likely gone because of COVID-19 closures.
It was really scary because we had just opened in this new location.
Big Valley Hobbytown had just moved to a new downtown location.
So it was scary to have made one payment and then have to be closed.
Tammy Abbey's business.
Technically it's a toy store, but it's more than that.
It stayed closed from the end of March to the end of April.
We have enough funds to pay 1 month's worth of bills.
Then something puzzling happened.
The number one thing that people were requesting was puzzles. And once we reopened RC cars, I'd be putting a car on the shelf and they'd walk in and say, "I'll take that one." Never seen anything like that.
Not driving to go to a Rockies game or an Avalanche game and everything that meant. So a lot of us do travel to Denver for those recreational opportunities and obviously spend money, but those were all shut down.
Instead of the $1 million sales tax loss Alamosa City Manager Heather Brooks anticipated, the city is up $378,000 compared to last year.
Some of our residents may drive the 2 hours to shop somewhere else. We don't think that happened as much. We think they shopped here locally or they did that through the internet. So either way, we were able to keep that sales tax.
And perhaps a resident or two picked up a new hobby.
It's a little odd, but this is the kind of stuff that we've wanted people to try.
For next,
for years.
I'm Marshall Zellinger in Alamosa.
City manager points out that the boost in sales tax is great for the city to continue to provide the same services, but like many areas, she tells us there are a lot of mom and pop stores that have not seen that same growth in business. Tonight's next question drops in from a viewer on Twitter asking what happens when a voter moves out of Colorado, registers to vote out of state. What measures exist to prevent the person from voting twice? Excellent question. Denver Clerk and Recorder's Office says voters who move will get flagged by the Electronic Registration Information Center, as well as the National Change of Address Program. Once flagged, that gets routed back to Colorado, and they're marked as inactive here. Now, if that doesn't happen fast enough, and a ballot is printed, mailed, then delivered, not sent back, well, then county clerks at that point are counting on people to not commit voter fraud. To do so, if you want to commit voter fraud, this is not simple. You have to fake a signature which is then checked against the original signature on file. Before that vote is counted, the signatures have to be matched. That has to be rectified. And if somebody is found trying to vote somebody else's ballot, which investigations in Colorado have found is very rare, then that gets referred for prosecution. Let's dig into the good news, bad news situation for Colorado's long-term care facilities. COVID cases have plummeted, yet some places don't know if they can stay open. And an artist takes on our isolation.
And now I think people understand as a collective, as a whole, what isolation is and what this kind of experience does to people.
A conversation about the cost of feeling alone. Next.
little bit cooler today with areas of smoke and haze. We were cooler due to a front that moved through that didn't bring any relief from the smoke and haze and didn't offer any moisture to us, but mid-60s, kind of comfortable for the start of October. And we have another weak front that'll be here on Saturday, but all the heavy weather is off across the eastern third of the nation. And with a blocking ridge of high pressure to our west, we continue to monitor the smoke in California that will make its way back into Colorado and along the Front Range. Air quality alerts are issued again tonight and tomorrow. Hey, but tomorrow's Friday. Fair skies on 43 this evening, areas of smoke and haze tomorrow. A little cooler Saturday, a little warmer Sunday, and then 80s are forecast for the first week of the new month.
Nursing homes that were at the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic at the start, they largely have their cases under control, yet they're facing a new challenge: how to stay financially stable in this new environment. Our Mark Salinger continues his reporting on how nursing homes are navigating COVID-19.
Nursing homes are now fighting two battles: a virus and their bank account. The facilities have had to invest a lot more money into securing personal protective equipment to keep employees and residents safe. They've also had to pay employees overtime and bonuses for working through the pandemic. On top of that, the number of residents living inside these facilities has dropped sharply.
When they start to see a decrease in the number of people that they care for, and therefore their revenue, they have to make some very difficult choices about.
Doug Farmer is the president of the Colorado Healthcare Association, representing senior care centers across the state. He estimates the number of residents living inside nursing homes has decreased between 15 and 40% in some places.
I think people are waiting to make sure that things have leveled out, to see if there's a vaccine.
Let's go up north and take a look at the Estes Park Health Living Center. The facility has 52 licensed beds. Right now, it says less than half are occupied. It expects to lose $1.4 million this year, about $56,000 for each empty bed. The financial strain brought on by the pandemic has forced the owners to propose closing the facility entirely. About 55% of all nursing homes around the country report operating at a loss this year, according to a survey by the American Healthcare Association.
If we don't start to see things turn around with the number of people who are availing themselves of long-term care, that will be the financial struggle that they'll have to reckon with.
Even with the pandemic still taking lives, nursing homes now struggle to keep the doors open. For Next, I'm Mark Salinger.
Estes Park Living Center is still looking for options to avoid closing. If they are forced to close, residents would have to move somewhere, and many of them likely outside of Estes Park. Perhaps you noticed I've been eating my feelings during the pandemic. He paints his.
For me, a really emotional connection to, 3 months spent on your own.
And one of the countless pandemic home improvement projects has turned into a sort of neighborhood speakeasy. And we have the password. Next. Pandemic has given us the feels: stress, frustration, sadness, loneliness, not great feels. An artist in Denver has been collecting all of that on canvas, hoping that perhaps his final product will help us feel more connected.
The sense of isolation is being on your own. I guess in some instances facing your own demons and laying them to rest. I'm W. Max Thomason. I'm an oil painter. I have an exhibition, Isolation, at Bit Factory Gallery and Studios. The exhibition deals with the isolation period of the pandemic of 2020. What happened was I got the idea for the show and I started putting the paintings together, and all of a sudden it started telling a story. This is kind of what a lot of people went through. For me, a really emotional connection to, 3 months spent on your own. You never know what somebody's going through individually at any given time anyway, but then lock them up for 3 months without any outside contact. What does that possibly do to the psyche, or what kind of imagery would it bring out? Some of the paintings you look at and you see desperation, sadness. Some of them look almost happy, content. Some of them could be just any given night or day in any given city, with or without a pandemic. What I like is when people walk to the exhibition, and on their way out, I'm always sitting by the front door. A lot of times people will engage me and tell me what each piece meant to them, or what they read into it, or what the entire exhibition made them feel, or whatnot. And it's been a mixed bag all over the place. And that's really what I want, is for people to get what they want to out of it.
Some beautiful work. We are back with your feedback and a look inside the sordid world of one couple's garage à trois. We love celebrating the ingenuity of Coloradans who want to find ways to safely socialize during the pandemic. Remember we showed you those neighbors who converted their shared fence into a bar top where they could gather? John and Aaron in Lakewood might have topped that one. They converted the spare bay in their 3-car garage, the spot where they just stored all kinds of stuff like the pink toy Hummer, which is awesome. They converted that spot into a neighborhood speakeasy for the pandemic. They've named this section of the 3-car garage the garage à trois. It's good, I like that. Neighbors were invited over, everybody had to bring their own bottle. In return, everybody got the garage code and could come back anytime, even if the hosts aren't there. So people just come and go from John and Aaron's garage à trois. He said that the latest that anybody's been raging out there is about 1 a.m. They don't mind. Everybody's welcome. John said that they and the neighbors clean the thing daily so that nobody catches anything unexpected from a garage à trois. Finish with your feedback. Susan, who I love, wrote, identified herself like those old newspaper columns as baffled in Boulder, said, when will next begin the series on translating election ballot issues? Look for a firm date to start, Susan, but it's going to be after you receive your ballots, because the idea is that we sit down with them here and in a couple of nights go through all the issues together. See you next time.